Hello there and welcome back to another review. So keeping with that idea of cult movies or movies I remember watching as a kid, I thought today we'd have a look at Robert Zemeckis' 1988 Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's weird how the previous movie, one of my favourites, well, kids' favourites, Willow, 1988, this movie as well, 1988. I say directed by Bob Zemeckis and starring Bob Hoskins, and many don't know that this film is actually based on a novel called Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Gary K. Wolfe. Again, like I always say, could be wrong, but I know there definitely was a novel involved that this film was based on. Loads to say about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, lots to get through, so if I talk really fast, please forgive me. I don't want to keep you any longer than I need to. So had Spielberg on board with his production company Amblin. Now it's very sort of like forget how like this film did. I mean, critics, how well this film did. I mean, critics absolutely loved it. With this Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you can't underestimate how well this film was praised when it came out, and it still is now. You really can't underestimate, let's say, how many critics loved it. The film was considered groundbreaking. I think aside from the special effects and seeing Toons and humans on screen together, the film and its plot at its core is sort of a straight detective story, and one could argue plays a lot more like Roman Polanski's sort of Jack Nicholson's Chinatown than what you could say is sort of a kids movie. And that's one of the appeals I think about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, is that it doesn't just hold your hand through, like there is actually a plot here going on. I say you got a detective story, rather like it's sort of like Chinatown and cartoons, and it makes this wacky sort of detective cartoon hybrid. And it's, as I say, you can't really put Who Framed Roger Rabbit into any, I don't think you can really lump it into any sort of genre. It is just Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, when I was a kid, they showed the classic cartoons on TV, especially like on a Saturday, like, you know, Droopy Dog, Tom and Jerry. Used to have all the classic Hanna-Barbera shows on when I was little. The early 90s, even in the early 90s, we had shows like Tiny Toon Adventures. We had the Animaniacs. Unfortunately, that sort of classic age, that classic tunes, like sort of from the golden age, like way back in the day, and even that sort of mini revival that happened in sort of the late 80s, early 90s. It seems to be somewhat lost, but Roger Rabbit is sort of a tribute to that, and I think that is why young and old like this movie. You had the tunes for the kids, and you sort of had this detective story running through it for the adults. Now, of course, you can't talk about Roger Rabbit and not mention Christopher Lloyd's performance as Judge Doom, if I can say his name right, which I'm sure, like many of you out there, if you watched this as a kid, you were absolutely traumatized, right? Like I mentioned before, when you're a kid, you actually like being scared, like I mentioned in my Return to Oz review. Absolutely loved that movie. I was scared out of my pants, but I couldn't stop watching it. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Judge Doom, especially at the ending, as we all know, the character, absolutely terrifying. Even Christopher Lloyd, when he's just playing it straight in this, when you think this is Doc Brown, the guy can play somebody like that, and then like this is just two sort of like polar opposites. I say absolutely traumatized me when I was a kid, and I remember so many times that I could watch this film up to the end, and then it sort of becomes stuff of nightmares with sort of Doom revealing himself as a toon. I mean, it terrified me, and the older I got, it was so nice to realise sort of I was not the only one, because when you're a kid and you're sort of watching them on your own, or sort of only you and your close friends like you can talk to about it. But the older I got, then find out from many people around the world that the ending of Roger Rabbit terrified them too. So it was really sort of made me feel at ease that I wasn't the only one who was, as I say, it just had a bit of an effect on. Now, at the time, I think this was the most expensive expensive film ever produced. I know, as we know, I think that we've seen Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse. I think this was the first time they'd sort of been on screen together, and I think they tried to get characters like Popeye and Casper, but couldn't. We had Terry Gilliam originally offered the role of director, and get this, I think Harrison Ford was in mind to play the Bob Hoskins role. Also, Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, and Eddie Murphy. I mean, Eddie Murphy would have been very interesting. That would have been very interesting. There was something about this movie when watching it as a kid, with the plot being not by your numbers. It's not a children's story. The gritty setting, Jessica Rabbit as a character with ample cleavage. There was something about this movie that made it grown up, in that the filmmakers were not using these characters for sort of the gimmick alone. They were sort of making sure that let's not patronise people. Let's actually give them a story that does just involve cartoons. when I was a kid, I always thought, like, who the hell was Roger Rabbit? Like, should I know this character? Tim Curry was offered the role of Doom, but was considered too terrifying, which I can understand, as you only need to look at him in Legend, if you look like a review of that, and as Pennywise in it. I mean, make no mistake, the film is very risque and is crude in places with various sexual references and adult themes, but I think that is why people love this movie. It's a grown-up film, and at the time, I always found it too adult, even for me, even as a kid. As I say, I mean, we had Spielberg involved, we had Zemeckis, we had Warner Brothers, Disney on board. The budget, I think, was over 50 million. With all that with all that adding in, with all that bundled in, there was no reason why this film shouldn't work. There has been legal issues, controversies over the years, of course, and a sequel has been spoke about for years and years. But let's look at Who Framed Roger Rabbit today and see how it holds up. But just Judge Doom, Christopher Lloyd, the fact you see him in, I know he worked with Bob Zemeckis, Back to the Future, obviously, but the fact he can go playing somebody like Doc Brown, somebody so lovable, somebody who you want to hang out with, then going straight into going into Judge Doom a few years later, and the fact he doesn't blink when he's speaking and all these things, and as I say, the final reveal in the last act of the movie just all adds to, and it's not, and like I say, you talk about movie villains, like I say, like Darth Vader and characters like that. Judge Doom is up there, right? Make no mistake, Judge Doom is up there as probably one of the most famous movie villains of all time. So, of course, we all know the setup to this movie. Toons and humans sort of coexist in this universe. The film opens with a cartoon of Roger Rabbit and Baby Herman in like a homage to the classic sort of Tom and Jerry Looney Tune cartoons of old. And what is great about this opening scene, not only does it introduce us to Roger Rabbit, but also kids in the audience get to be absorbed right away. Like, I think that was the only way they could open the movie. Let's just open with a cartoon. And it gets, as I say, if you had your young kid there at the time, you was taking your kid to see this would have absorbed them right away. We learn, of course, this is all like a production. The Toons are actors, and I just love how Eddie Valiant has like drinking problem in like a kids movie, like he's having hard liquor. We're talking here. The film is set in 1947, so Roger Rabbit's poor performances in his movies is down to his concerns about his wife Jessica, and Roger's boss Maroon wants Valiant to follow her to see, like Eddie to follow her to see what was going on. So we have human and cartoon sort of coexisting, and a cartoon rabbit who is married to a cartoon human. Okay, whatever. So kind of cool. The first real cameo, which I did like, is Dumbo, because Dumbo is another one of my favourite Disney movies. So right away, you see Dumbo, so it's like, Dumbo's there. So you start to sort of relax, and then as the film progresses and goes on, it gets more convoluted, it gets more sinister, and it does get quite scary. So Valiant borrows a camera. We learn that a Toon killed his brother by dropping a piano on his head, so the guy's still grieving. So we have mystery and intrigue, and at this club we see Donald and Daffy in a scene that, I don't know if you know any of the history of this movie, but the scene with Donald and Daffy has had a bit of controversy over the years as well, but we won't go into that. And he meets Marvin Acme, the owner of Toontown. We get introduced to Jessica as she performs, and we see Betty Boo here too. And whilst on the subject of adult animated grown-up films, do any of you remember Cool World? Does anybody remember Cool World? I think it's made in 1992. It's sort of the same, not same kind of idea, but it had Brad Pitt in it. Kim Basinger was sort of like a cartoon. Gabriel Byrne, I think, was in it, if I recall. I will have to watch that movie again, because I remember seeing it, and I wouldn't necessarily say it was a good movie, but it's a movie that did stick with me for a while, very much in that early 90s vibe. But it sort of does what this film does, but just not as sort of as polished as sort of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I recall it's a much more adult movie. But let me know if you remember Cool World. So anyway, we all know about Jessica Rabbit. Let's just say the character has her fans. With Kathleen Turner's voice as well, it all works. And one of my favourite lines when Valiant has like an altercation with an ape-like bouncer, and he's like, "Who you calling chimp?" And for some reason, I just like that line. Don't ask me why. So Valiant gets photos of Jessica playing patty cake with Acme. Roger is upset, and I love that at least he took it well as he crashes out through the window. Funny too, when Valiant reminisces of his brother, we see clippings that he rescued Huey, Dewey and Louie and cleared Goofy of like spy charges as well, which I thought was quite funny. And these clippings where they sort of give you a backstory of Valiant and the character and like what he's done. And it's a great way for us to get to know someone like his brother, who we don't ever ever see or meet, but we get to sort of know him through these newspaper clippings. So next we learn that Marvin is dead after having a safe dropped on him. Then we meet Judge Doom, who couldn't believe this was Doc Brown. The fact that Lloyd could go from playing someone so lovable to someone so terrifying. He doesn't blink, he's all in black, and this is one scary baddie. We meet his henchmen, the Weasels, and he's dipping, and also this scene like horrific where he kills this like cute, adorable, lovable sort of animated shoe, which as a kid I hated it. It really did. You're watching it and you'd never seen sort of things like that in a cartoon before at that point, like, because you're just used to stuff, like I say, like Wacky Races or Tom and Jerry or, like I say, Popeye or cartoons like that. Here you have a guy actually killing cartoons, which as a kid is something you do not want to see, but they does it in such a horrific fashion, just dropping it slowly into this dip, and just hated it. So he suspects Roger of the murder. Toontown is under his like jurisdiction, so we have grown up, very adult themes. Like there's a line in this where Herman says like, I have 50-year-old lust and a 3-year-old dinky, from Baby Herman, which is super, super adult, funny, but super, super adult. Like, you don't realise at its core just how grown up this movie is, and little nuances, little lines, little things here and there. It's a wonder it got past, like it got the rating that it did, because I think if this came out now, it'd probably be rated a bit higher. I think now, if they were to make this now, they probably would even, dare I say, go a bit more adult. I don't know, or maybe the PC brigade would not allow it, and it'd have to be a lot more kiddified, like a lot more for children. I don't know. So Herman tells Valiant that Acme had a will and was going to leave Toontown to the Toons, and that is the reason he got killed. Valiant finds that night he met Jessica that Acme had his will on him. He finds Roger at his place, and they get cuffed together, and the Weasels turn up looking for Roger. He hides him in the sink, and they go to see Dolores, this like waitress Valiant knows, so he can sort of get these cuffs off. The joke being, of course, that Roger can just slip his hands out of the cuffs anytime. Like, he didn't need the key anyway, but as I say, that's sort of the payoff there. So he can just like take them off any time. So Valiant suspects Maroon, and we even have like a prostate joke here. I think many jokes in this, if under 10 years old, they will simply go over the kids' heads. I know they definitely did for me. It's one of them movies, if you see for the first time when you're 8 or 9, watch it again when you're about 15, 16, and you will get so many jokes that you didn't even know were in there before. So Valiant meets Jessica after the cut infamous pighead sequence, which I think you can see on YouTube, but there is a scene cut from this movie explained, and Valiant is sort of topless when we see him. It's because there's a big chunk of the movie, well, not a big chunk, but there's a scene that is cut out of the movie. And it turns out Maroon blackmailed Jessica, saying Roger would never work again. And after Laval, Valiant has his head on Jessica's boobs and his pants down when Dolores walks in, who informs him about Cloverleaf, which is a company that wants Toontown. And see what I mean about the plot, like even just describing it, it's really quite involved to what you think is just the kids' animated movie. There's a lot more to Who Framed Roger Rabbit than that. And I love when Doom shows up again, and we had the classic shaving a haircut trick, to which Roger just can't help but resist and reply to. So as he is about to go in the dip, Valiant makes Roger take a drink, and watch how he pulls Dolores down by her cleavage as well. They get in the animated taxi Benny, and after hiding out in the cinema, Valiant tells Roger that a Toon killed his brother and had a burning red eyes and a high-pitched voice. See, to be honest, this would have been good enough plot on its own, a detective looking for a Toon that murdered his brother, regardless of the Roger Rabbit storyline. And Bob Hoskins, speaking of his performance in this, holds the film great. I think Bob Hoskins does an amazing job in this movie. I think he really keeps it going. He has the right amount of seriousness and not taking it too seriously, and you actually do get to see in the film as well what a really great physical actor Bob Hoskins was as well. I mean, obviously he goes work like Spielberg involved with this, worked with him again on Hook, as we know, went on to play Mario, been in loads of stuff, Long Good Friday, Mermaids, you know it. But with this movie, I'd say it really does make Bob Hoskins shine as a performer, not just an actor, but as a performer. And I'd say really great stuff. Mona Lisa was another one. So Valiant goes to see Maroon, who wanted to sell the studio out of fear and blackmail out Acme. and tell me the story of greed, sex, and murder. You know, at one point is one of the lines. Is this a kids' movie? You know, so Roger gets knocked out and taken by Jessica. So Maroon wanted to save Toontown. It's like say 1 minute Maroon's sort of suspect of being the culprit or sort of involved, but it's actually him that wanted to save Toontown and gets shot by a gun through a window. So Valiant gets to a Toon gun from like Yosemite Sam, like in the back of his car, and he quits the bottle. And I love the bit where he fires like a bullet in the air, and the bullet uses like a tomahawk to shatter a bottle, which is it's just quite cool. It's just quite cool, and I like that. And I swear on this scene as well, the tunnel here looks very, very similar, if not very reminiscent of the tunnel used in Back to the Future too. But just quickly going back to Bob Hoskins, he was quite a big deal in the late 80s, early 90s. Bob Hoskins was, I would say, probably at his peak in terms of like movies that he was in. He just seemed to be quite like really everywhere. He was one of these actors that would just give everything a go. Like I say, he could do serious roles, he could do dramatic roles, and I say Who Framed Roger Rabbit, of all the people they could have probably had for the role, when you're talking people like Chevy Chase, I know Eddie Murphy turned it down because he didn't sort of get what the joke was. But say really, really, Bob Hoskins, as I say, carries the film really well. So Valiant drives into Toontown following Jessica, and I love how we get Droopy as the bellboy here. I mean, who doesn't love Droopy, right? We all love Droopy. Then we get Treaty as well. We get Mickey, where we see Mickey and Bugs on screen together here too. He goes down some random alley, finds Jessica, informs him it was Doom who killed Maroon and wants Toontown, and plans to eradicate it with his dip and have a freeway sort of run through it, and he will get the profits. So say quite involved, as I say, quite involved stuff, plot things that as a kid you probably wouldn't even be paying attention to. You know, if you're under sort of 10 years old, there's no way you'd be necessarily paying attention to all these like sort of plot points that happen through the movie. So he just plans to make profits. So Doom takes Jessica and Valiant to the Acme factory, where we have the classic booby trap line. No guesses which character that is sort of directed at. Roger picks up Benny, and Doom reveals he is the sole stockholder of Cloverleaf Industries. He arrives and gets like tied with Jessica on. Roger arrives and gets tied with Jessica on a hook. Now, as I say, when I was a kid, this ending freaked me out. I can't underestimate how much this did freak me out. I'm sure a lot of you out there, if you sort of watched this back in the day when it came out, if you were little back in the day, or even now, it's still freaky. It is still freaky. Like, you have no idea, you know, sure, you know, what it did to me. When I know, like I mentioned, when it got to this part, a couple of times in my first viewing, I had to turn it off, or I could barely watch it. Like, it just terrified me. When he's, like I say, Judge Doom sort of reveals what he's really a Toon. Valiant distracts the Weasels with a song and dance routine. We even get a balls joke here. Also found it very unsettling the Weasels fly to heaven too for some reason. Like, Toons and people do die in this movie. Doom wants to run over Eddie with a steamroller as this jet of dip is about to hit Roger and Jessica. Doom gets caught in the roller wheels with some Acme glue, and this is when we get the reveal he is a Toon. I think it's just them eyes above all else that super freaks me out even now. And it was him that killed Valiant's brother, and he gets sprayed with dip himself, and it was a rubber mask he wore. And I wish they could have made a point so we could have seen what the real, like, the Toon underneath looks like, because he was sort of wearing a rubber mask. Would have been great if they put that in. I know it was sort of expanded upon in a graphic novel when his name is Baron von Rotten, but I wish they could have, maybe Bob Zemeckis could have put that in the movie. But then you can't have everything. You know, you can't have everything. But quite a shrewd move actually on the filmmaker's part. They left it a mystery, I think. Then we learn, like, the will we learn was written in disappearing ink, and Toontown now belongs to the Toons, so all the Toons show up, and how else could you end it other than, like, Porky Pig turning up? But a very, very adult, animated, kids, children, family film, detective story, if that makes sense, with some very talented people involved, great performances from Hoskins and Lloyd, and one movie I'm sure we've all seen at some stage, but I just wanted to get a little review of it across, and just how much, as I say, it's not a lot of people love this movie. As I say, when it came out, it did really well. Critics loved it. I think, like I said, if nothing else, for the fact it did have a plot that, for the adults, you could actually, if nothing else, if you weren't into the Toons, if you weren't into the cartoons, you could sink your teeth into the plot this involved. It's actually probably more convoluted than it needs to be, but I'd say great performances from Hoskins and Lloyd, and I say, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We've all seen it. We all know the film, but terrifying, amazing villain. in Judge Doom. But as I say, if you haven't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, if I can talk today, make sure to go and check it out, because it is one of them classic 80s movies that I think everybody should see. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.
Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.